Sanhedrin Daf Yomi Aleph, Interconnectedness, שעליתי רשות, dinim of Arvut, where we will learn that we influence each other not only by the things we do and the things we say, but even by the things we feel and by the things we think. It's interesting that the shir is about interconnectedness. It's sponsored by Mesh Isaacson, and nothing is random. If one opts into the system of Chukei HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be governed by the laws of the Ribbono Shel Olam, then nothing is coincidental. And that Mesh chose to sponsor this shir in memory of his daughter Dina Oria, because together with Enosh and Telfed, he is just, last night was it launched, he just launched the Are You OK program, which is teaching how to start a conversation, how to truly listen, to encourage action and remind us to follow up, showing people that they're not alone. Because Mesh says it's okay not to be okay, but it's not okay to be alone. And it's just so interesting that this is the shir that Mesh is sponsoring. So we've learned some interesting things in the last couple of days. We learned on Daf Tes and Daf Yud, we learned how one can be responsible just by association, and even to the point of being punished or rewarded, not for doing anything, just for being part of a particular group, for being associated with a particular group. We learnt about the fact that when it comes to family, we don't snitch on one another, and that family expands very far. Family is the whole of Klal Yisrael. Today we go further and we learn it's not only not to snitch on another person, but we need to take steps to help another person not be caught out. I'm not talking here about criminality, I'm talking here about things that could embarrass them. Sometimes a person gets caught doing something embarrassing and you could prevent it. You could do something to prevent the person that embarrassment. We learn the principles of doing so in a very fascinating piece of Gemara with a number of different case studies. It starts with Rabbi Gamliel, who asked for 7 people to be gathered together in order to be Ma'aber the Shana. We learned in the Mishnah that Rabbi Gamliel holds you need 7 people to conclude Ibur HaShana, the addition of an extra month into a year, so as to align the solar and the lunar years. That has to be done by this decision of Beis Din, and the Beis Din has to have 7 people. When he got to the Beis Din, Rabbi Gamliel found there were 8. And the din is that it has to be done by the 7 people who were specifically invited. So he says, Miu she'ala shelo b'reshut, there's somebody here who's uninvited. Would you please leave? Omad Shmuel HaKatan v'amar. Shmuel HaKatan, it's a euphemistic name. He was known as Shmuel HaKatan, but he was one of the greatest Tanoim, early one from the Talmud of Rabbi Gamliel. And Shmuel HaKatan got up and says, Ani hu she'aliti shelo b'reshut. Excuse me, I'm sorry, my apologies. I was the one who am here unannounced. I didn't come here to participate in the proceedings, just to learn halacha. So Rabbi Gamliel says, Shev b'ni, just sit down, relax. You the kind of person we want to have on such a Beis Din, all years should have the zchut of being made into leap years through you. But what can we do? The Chachamim said you've got to have people who were specifically invited. V'lo Shmuel HaKatan have, and it wasn't him. He wasn't the one who was guilty. Somebody else was there without being invited. And to avoid the other person the embarrassment, he got up and said it was me. Rebbe was giving a shir and he smelt garlic. And he was upset. That's not a good thing to do. You come to a shir, you don't come just having eaten garlic. It disturbs other people. He's not talking about people who make a noise in the shir, who walk backwards and forwards in the shir. That chas v'sholom would never have happened in those days. What happened? Somebody had garlic for dinner and then came to a shir, and he thought that was thoughtless. That was not thoughtful to be able to come to a shir and disturb people with an unpleasant odor. And he said, whoever's ate garlic for dinner, please leave. Omar Rabbi Chia v'yotze, Rabbi Chia got up and go out. Amdu kulam v'yotze, so everybody followed him. They all went out. B'shachar, the next morning, Rebbe's son, Rabbi Shimon, found Rabbi Chia and says, was it you who caused my father this pain last night, that you walked out and then everybody else walked out because you ate garlic? He says, chas v'sholom, it wasn't me. I just did it to save somebody else the embarrassment. Rabbi Chia mehecha gamila. Where did Rabbi Chia learn it from? Rabbi Meir. He learned it from Rabbi Meir. There was a case when a woman came into the Beis HaMedrash and said, one of you have actually had relations with me, and we became husband and wife. And I don't know who it is. It's one of you here in the Beis HaMedrash. Omad Rabbi Meir v'chatav la get kritut. Rabbi Meir got up and said, you're right, here's a get, you're divorced. And he gave it. Omdu kotvu kulam v'natnu la. So the whole Beis HaMidrash got up and everybody gave her a get. So still nobody knew who it was. Rabbi Meir Mehecha Gamila, where did Rabbi Meir learn it from? Shmuel HaKotan, from our case of Shmuel HaKotan, who was earlier. Shmuel HaKotan Mehecha Gamila, where did Shmuel HaKotan learn it? Mishchanya ben Yechiel, he learned it from Shchanya ben Yechiel in Ezra. תכתיב ויען שכניה בן יחיאל מבני אlam ויאמר לעזרא אנחנו מעלנו באלוקינו ונשיב נשים הנוכריות מעמי הארץ ואתה איש מקווה לישראל על זאת. Ezra was furious because he'd heard that he was told that the Jews had started marrying the local women without conversions. And he davens, he's upset, this bothers him. And Shchanya says, we've done terrible things, but we can do tshuva, we can divorce the women and we can do tshuva. The things are not lost. Where did he learn to take it? It wasn't him. He didn't marry a non-Jewish woman. Why does he say we have done? He puts himself, we have done a terrible thing. He learned it from Yeshua. After there was the issue with Yericho, the Bnei Yisrael was successful with Yericho. They weren't allowed to take anything from the city, no spoils. There was a cherem. After that, they went to Ai, and there was a tragedy. They weren't successful in Ai. And Yeshua realized there's something wrong, and Hashem says to him, it's because people have been taking things from Yericho. They weren't allowed to. And Hashem says, why you did? It's not a time to daven. Chata Yisrael. The Jewish people have sinned. Really, Rebbeinu Shalom? Tell me who it is, and I'll get them. Yeshua is asking Hashem to snitch on Klal Yisrael. Do you think I'm a snitcher? Says Hashem. Do you think I'm going to tell you who it was? Hatel goralot. Figure it out yourself. Do your own homework. As we said yesterday, sometimes the district attorneys are lazy and they want to use plea bargains to make their work easy. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, do goralot, go and find out who it was. I'm not going to tell you who it was. And you can also say it's learned from Moshe. When Tzlofchad goes and when Bnei Yisrael, there are people from Bnei Yisrael, just a few people, maybe only one, who goes out and is Mechalel Shabbos. Hashem says to Moshe, Ad ana me antem. And how long are you going to rebel against me? He says to Moshe, what did Moshe do? Moshe wasn't responsible. Says the Gemara in Bava Kama, and Rashi brings it on the spot. Bahadi hutza laki karva. That's where the statement comes from, that sometimes the rose gets plucked with the thorns. If you're trying to remove thorns, sometimes you remove the plant in the process because it's part of the same organism. It does it. You can't always separate it out. And so here we see that kind of guilt by association with Moshe. So there are many, many questions that bothered me and I'm sure bothers you as you learn through the sugya. And then I found some of the questions in the Marshal and in the Marshal. Firstly, why do they have to learn from somewhere? Do you have to actually have a makor? I want to save somebody embarrassment, so I take the blame. Do I have to have a source in the Torah to teach me that I'm allowed to take the blame in order to save somebody else embarrassment? We learned from Tamar just in the parasha now that a person should rather jump into a fire than cause somebody else embarrassment. Certainly I can take the blame in order to cause somebody embarrassment. Do we have to have all these sources? And secondly, why didn't they all learn from the last source? Why didn't they all learn from the Rebbeinu Shalom? Why does each one learn from the one before him? And even with the Rebbeinu Shalom, we see in Bava Kama, Moshe was not responsible. Moshe was just there. It was because of the proximity. It wasn't that Hashem was blaming Moshe in that sense. So what does it all mean? And the Marshal gives a bit of an approach to some of the issues, but nothing really satisfied me until I got back to. It's interesting. The last few days we've just had the Mario Bloch, we've just had Rabbi Yosef Leib Bloch, the Tel Zerov in Shurei Das. And he deals with this piece of Gemara that completely revolutionizes our understanding of it and teaches us something that is critically important. And he says that you see from here that you can't just assume that a good deed is a good deed. And in fact, he says that's why it's called midah. When we talk about virtues, there's no word for virtue. There's no word for good characteristics. It's midah tova or midah ra. You've got good midas or bad midas. You've got good character or bad character. And the word midah means a measure. Says the Tel Zerov because it depends on the measure. if you take a good midah and you're extreme in the good midah, it can have bad outcomes. We talked about second and third and fourth order consequences. So the Talmud talks about the consequences even of a good midah. You think it's good, but you're not thinking far enough. If you think far enough, you'll realize it isn't so good. And even with your own thought, you can't do it. One has to be able to get from that. You've got to be able to learn these things, not only from a source in the Torah, but as the Marshal says, from your generation, from your Rabbeim. You learn how to live, not from way back. You learn how to live from the people who teach you Torah. It's in your time, it's in your circumstance. Each one learns from the previous generation, although they could go back 3 or 4 or 5 generations. They could go back to Yeshua, they could go back to Moshe Rabbeinu. They don't. Each one learns from their Rebbe. Each one learns from somebody close to them. How to balance midot, how to balance human character, how to balance emotions, that what feels like a good thing is a good thing in feeling, but isn't necessarily a good thing in action if its second or third or fourth order consequences could be negative. And therefore he says at the top of this next page on the sources, Mikol Amur Mitbarer, Ki Efshar Lachlit al Tuvo v'Yofyo Shel Regesh. You can't decide yourself on whether a particular feeling is good or isn't good. Umagam Litnaheg Lefim B'Chayim HaMa'asiyim, and certainly not to actually act accordingly. Terem Shakaloto Adam B'Moznei HaSeichel, until the person has actually weighed it all up very carefully, and even that is sometimes not always sufficient. Klal Gadolhu. Shutaf hu ha'adam lepu'ulat chaveiro. There's an important principle. A human being is a partner in the affairs of his friend. Davar she'eino nichnas b'chug ha'efsharut hu. It's not possible to conceive ki pu'ulat ha'echad tiyeh meshulelet hashpa'a al mishneu v'al hakrovim lo. That one person's action is not going to be impactful on another person's life. ולא רק עליהם, כי אם במידה זו או אחרת משפיע הוא על נפשות בני אדם בכלל, האדם השפעתו מרובה על חברו. It's absolutely extreme. And so he goes on to develop the idea that when, in the cases that we've got, for example, Shmuel HaKatan gets up and goes out. What the tells Rov is saying is Shmuel HaKatan is saying to himself, if I was who I should be, this person would never have done such a thing. To walk into a shir with a foul odor, well, that's the case further. In the case of Shmuel HaKatan coming to the Beis Din without being invited, who would have the chutzpah to do that? But if I was a greater person, it wouldn't have happened in my sphere of influence, because my greatness would have elevated the people around me. So I am partially responsible. Shmuel HaKatan doesn't just get up to save the other embarrassment. Says the tells of such an unbelievably important idea. Shmuel HaKatan gets up because he takes responsibility for what happened. I'm in some small way responsible, because if I was who I should and could be, this person wouldn't have done what he did. And so we've got the next case when Rabbi was giving his shir and he says somebody's eaten garlic. Rabbi Chia gets up because Rabbi Chia says, if I was who I should be, nobody would have the chutzpah to come to the shir and disturb people with a bad odor. They would take care of their body hygiene before they came to the shir. That's important. You're among people. So I'm not going to sit and blame them. I've got to look at myself and say, if I was a greater person, would they have done such a thing? And so it goes with each one. With Rabbi Meir, when he takes responsibility, and Rabbi Meir says, if I was a greater person, would anybody have done such a thing as this woman is accusing them? And so it goes on, and the Telzerov says, V'zehu b'nogea la'ashpa'a klalita sheyesh l'chol adam b'asher hu adam al anshei tevel. This applies to all of humanity. This is not even just to Jewish people. This is human interconnectedness. And in the footnote, I quote an important study that was done by Professor Christakis and Fowler from Harvard and San Diego University in 2008, where they found that a person's happiness created a 15% chance of people 1 degree removed being happy too, even if they don't see you. So if you're happy now, your friends, wherever they may be, there's a 15% chance that they will be happier now than they would be if you were unhappy. And a second degree friend, it's 10%, and a third degree friend, it's nearly 6%. That means your friend's friend is affected by your mood, not even by what you did. Your friends who you don't even know. You've never heard of them. They might live far away, although they found there's a geographic correlation. Your friend can be affected by that. So in 2008, the scientists found that out. 100 years ago, the Telzerov, based on Chazal from thousands of years ago, says it's impossible to think that your thoughts and moods and feelings don't impact others, and that's general humanity. Ulam b'nei Yisrael yesh lehem chirvut nefesh miyuchedet hamesavevet v'goremet la'ashpah gedola b'nefesh kol adam Yisrael al asher b'nei amo. But when it comes to Jewish people, kol Yisrael arevim zeh bezeh, the Gemara says in Shavuos. And the Telzerov says it doesn't say zeh lezeh as it's usually quoted. Each Jew is responsible one for the other. Arevim comes from the word mu'uravim. They are mixed up. They are interconnected. Zeh bazeh. We're in each other's lives. We're mixed up we're one part of a nation. It's not possible for there to be flavor in one part, whether good or bad flavor, that doesn't affect the whole pot. We're mu'uravim. We're stirred up together. That's who we are. היינו שנפשותיהם מקושרות ומרעבות יחד, ולכן פעולת היחיד מוצאת הד בכל בלבבות כל בני ישראל. Everything we do finds an echo in the hearts of others. It's not possible to be any other way. And that's how we can understand what happens. And when Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ad ana mi'antem, look, there are Jews who've just been Mechal Shabbos. How long are you going to rebel against me? Says the Telzerov. It's not just because of proximity, as we learnt in Rabbeinu Yonah the day before yesterday. It's not just the proximity and association. It's the impact and the effect. If somebody was Mechal Shabbos, you are responsible. And how amazing it would be in our time, and particularly for us religious people and for everybody, if when we saw something going wrong, we didn't point fingers, but we looked and said, if we were who we should be, it wouldn't be happening. We talk about the left wing and we talk about the Chilonim. Talk about us. If there are these people undermining Yiddishkeit in Israel or elsewhere, yes, they have responsibility, but that's not our business. We're not here to judge them. We're here to look inward and say, if we would be who we could and should be, they wouldn't be that way. Rav Kook speaks about this very often and says, "Kshetzadikim mitgabrim b'kedushatam ha'atzmit." When a tzaddik is powerful in his own interior righteousness, just within himself, she'ora chesed me'ir b'hem b'hazracha gdola. There's a spirit of kindness that radiates from the person. Yecholim heim likro l'tshuva gam et harushaim hayoter muchlatim. By virtue of who you are, you will bring back people who are far gone, who are wicked people. And if you're not bringing back the wicked people, look at yourself and question, am I who I should be? Not are they who they should be. They are not who they should be because I am not who I should be. They are not who they could be because I am not who I should be. That's what we've got to understand is the power. And that's in each of these cases. That's what they learn one from the other in this whole sugya of Gemara. What they learn is when it's not just that I'm saving them embarrassment, I'm taking responsibility so as to save them embarrassment, because it's not only them, it's me too. And to understand, it's a bit of a twist on the Me Too movement. Instead of me too, I'm also a victim. Me too, I'm also a perpetrator. Me too, I'm also responsible. And the moment we'll all start looking at ourselves and saying, what can I do in my own interior life to improve my standards of being, to improve my midot, to improve my character, to improve my refinement, to improve my depth of understanding, to improve my empathy and my kindness? What can I do? Because if I would be who I should be, they could be who they could be.